members of Working on Fire. It's a very exciting program, and just with these two presentations by Trevor Wilson and Nico Westhuizen, we've learned a tremendous amount about our own organisation, and we'd like to thank them for those very well presented presentations. It's my privilege and delight to give you some guidelines for prescribed burning for livestock production and wildlife management in African grasslands and savannas. Africa is famous for its grasslands and savannas and the animals that go with it, and so I will be introducing you to some of these components of our part of the world. Prescribed burning in African grasslands and savannas. Oh, I'd like to also just pay respect or recognition to the other members of the team. My wife, we work together. We've worked together for the last over 40 years, and I'd like to thank her for her support and contributions. And then the other members of the team, Ross Good and Terence Conley or Bob Conley from Working on Fire and in Research and Development. Prescribed burning in African grasslands and savannas. Fire is used for numerous reasons as an essential range management practice. Range management meaning the management of natural vegetation for, in this case, livestock production and wildlife management. And these are some of the very attractive breeds of animals, of cattle that we have in Africa, and prescribed burning is a very important management tool in ensuring them that they get adequate food in the right quality and in the right palatability. Of course, Africa is famous for its wildlife, and elephants and all the other different wild ungulates in Africa are dependent in many of the areas, in the higher rainfall areas of Africa, particularly in the savannas and grasslands, for their nutrition and that, and their health is dependent on the burning of the vegetation to support the production of forage for these animals. The key factors to consider in a prescribed burning program, and I'd like to just go through these, is that you must have a clear reason as to why you are burning. And the other thing is that you should have a clear understanding of the condition of the vegetation. We refer to the natural vegetation as rangeland, and as to whether you burn or not depends upon the ecological status of the grass sward, in terms of its botanical composition, its basal cover, the extent to which it can resist soil erosion, and the grass fuel load are very important components of the vegetation that must be considered if you decide to burn or not. The other component of the vegetation, you've got grass, and you've got bush, or trees and shrubs, must also be taken into consideration. And then once you've assessed the condition of the rangeland in terms of its suitability for different systems of land use, and I mentioned the two most important ones, livestock production and wildlife management, you must formulate a fire regime which can achieve the objectives of those different systems of land use. And the fire regime refers to the type and intensity of fire and the season and frequency of burning, and one must address those and define them for a particular system of land use. Then, of course, the pre and post management are other factors that are essential in a prescribed burning program and must be related to the systems of land use that I've referred to. Now, the primary objective of the prescribed burning program is to develop and maintain the productivity and economic viability of natural rangeland ecosystems. So there are two components. One is to maintain the productivity and the economic viability of the areas that are being burnt for those different land users, livestock producers and wildlife managers. A secondary objective is also to develop and or maintain the biodiversity and sustainability of natural ecosystems. The reasons for burning. Further, one of the most important reasons is to remove moribund grass material. Then my wife standing next to a good stand of grass, which in that condition over there has got very low quality as a forage source for domestic livestock and for wildlife, and it's in a moribund condition. It's suffering from self-shading, the quality is very low, and it needs to be burnt off to encourage regrowth of valuable forage. The other problem in the savanna areas in particularly is an increase in the trees and shrubs, and we have this problem of bush encroachment at the moment, which has been partly encouraged by global change, elevated levels of carbon dioxide, which favour trees as opposed to grass, and it's aggravating the whole problem of bush encroachment. Now, these are the primary reasons for prescribed burning, and these are why we burn. Other possible reasons for burning is to control animal diseases such as ticks, which are very prone and abundant in Africa, improve the botanical composition of the grass sward to encourage those grass species which are productive and palatable to animals, and to promote nutrient cycling. I'd like to just touch briefly, just to give you a little bit of an image of Africa, the exciting place that it is in terms of the effect of fire on grass, ticks, where we visited Tanzania, the Ngorongoro crater, which is one of the magic places of the world, 7 times to investigate the problems of grass or ticks in grasslands. And this was in 2001. We were invited to investigate the cause of the high mortality of buffalo due to ticks in the crater. These are the famous African buffaloes, and they were approximately about 1,000 of these buffaloes had died as a result of babesia, which is red water which causes these animals to die. And I conducted, with my wife, our team, we conducted grass surveys, 30 of them with a disc pasture meter to determine grass fuel loads to see what type of habitat the ticks prefer. We conducted tick surveys and then put down a square quadrant and collected the number of ticks in areas with different amounts of grass, and we found that whenever there was more than 4,000 kilograms of grass, then there were millions of ticks. And this is a major breakthrough. And we recorded these high tick loads in extensive grasslands dominated by Flores guyana, which is Rhodes grass, a dominant species in the crater, and where the grass fuel load exceeded 4,000 kilograms, you had these very high tick loads. We conducted tick surveys in areas outside the crater occupied by the local Maasai tribesmen, who maintained that they controlled ticks through fire. And we went and recorded the number of ticks in the areas that are used by the Maasai tribesmen with their cattle in that, to see what the relationship was in terms of the fuel load of grass and the incidence of ticks, and found that whenever In all the areas that were occupied and used by the Maasai tribesmen, the fuel load, the gross fuel load, never exceeded 3,000 kilograms. So we initiated a burning program in the Ngorongoro crater that in all areas where there's more than 4 tons of grass, we burnt them and we solved the tick problem. And on the other hand, there are also invalid reasons for burning. And the one is to stimulate an out-of-season green diet for livestock. Heavy continuous grazing after burning causes excessively intense and frequent defoliations, which significantly reduce the vigor of the grass sward and the cover, resulting in the loss of palatable and productive grass species and accelerated soil erosion. And here is an example where it's important to manage the rangelands, the grasslands, in the appropriate manner after a burn. And in this area over here, it was burnt and then grazed and then rested to allow the grass to recover, whereas in this area over here, it was burnt and continuously grazed with livestock to the detriment of the basal cover and the stability of the rangeland. This continuous heavy grazing with livestock after burning is a problem. Everyone blames the sheep for doing the damage, but in actual fact, it's the farmers who own the sheep who are who are causing the problems. The basic principle involved in applying prescribed burning is that it must be based on the condition of the rangelands and the condition of the vegetation pertinent to the system of land use in terms of livestock and wildlife management, maintaining and promoting forage production and biodiversity and reducing soil erosion. These are the objectives that one has, and generally burning should only be considered if the grass sward is in a climax or subclimax ecological status dominated by increase of one and decrease of grass species. These are the productive species in the sward and must be taken into consideration. The reason that why one makes that recommendation is that burning is an extreme treatment and can cause a degradation in the condition of the vegetation if it is not done to rangeland or grassland in the appropriate ecological status. The other important consideration is that the grass fuel load, whenever it is more than 4,000 kilograms, it's in a moribund condition and therefore needs to be removed. So as soon as the grass reaches that 4,000 kilograms, that gives you an idea as to whether you should burn it or not. The background to burning only in situations that are dominated by decreases or increase of one species is summarized in this particular diagram over here, where if you have a low, on a grazing gradient going from low intensity grazing to heavy intensity grazing, you have these different species dominating. In a low intensity grazing, you have increase of one species dominating, and if moderate utilization, you have decrease of species and increase of two species with high utilization, which is overgrazed. In successional terms, you have a climax stage, a subclimax stage, and a pioneer stage, and these are the two situations that you will consider burning if it is dominated by decreases. And increase of ones you burn because the vegetation is in a well-adapted condition to be able to withstand the extreme treatment of prescribed burning. Putting it in pictures as to when rangeland is suitable for burning, you'll only burn if it is in that condition over there. Sorry. You will only consider an area to be burned if it is in a decreaser stage, like that one over there, where the decreases are dominant, or it's in an undergraze situation where the increase of one species are dominant, in this situation over there, and sorry. But you will not consider burning if it's in an increase of 2 stages, in a degraded stage where it's prone to erosion and that, and this is when you shouldn't burn. Now the assessment of range condition and the ecological status of the vegetation. Simple and practical techniques for assessing range condition and ecological status are available. There are simple grass survey techniques that we've developed. Sorry. And then we've got a very simple way of estimating how much the grass fuel load is to be able to determine whether it is more than 4,000 kilograms, and we've also developed a simple technique for doing tree and shrub surveys to determine whether it's in an encroached state or not. The fire regime that one must apply in terms of prescribed burning must be related to the reasons for burning, and this refers to the type of intensity and season and frequency of the burning regime. The type of fire, we recommend, based on research results, that you use head fires when burning rangeland, because it does least damage to the grass sward. The heat is released off the ground, away from the growing points of the grasses, and can cause minimum damage to the grass when burned as a head fire. Conversely, if you burn with a backfire, such as that one over there, when it's burning against the wind, the heat is being maintained for higher level periods of time at grass level, at ground level, and it causes a high mortality of the grass tillers, and therefore a deterioration in the condition of the grass sward. In terms of fire intensity, this is quite easy. Whenever the grassland needs to be burnt, in other words, there's more than 4,000 kilograms per hectare, to remove moribund material, apply a cool fire, and you can achieve that when the grass curing is greater than 80%, air temperature less than 20 degrees, relative humidity above 50%, wind speed not above 12 kilometers per hour, it mustn't be dangerous, and a fire danger index of 21 to 45. And this is what a cool fire looks like. I know it's a relative term, but as opposed to burning to achieve a high intensity fire to control bush encroachment, when you can achieve it with that particular fire regime over there, the major difference to burning to achieve a high intensity fire as opposed to a cool fire, burning when the air temperature is somewhere between 20 and 30 degrees and the relative humidity less than 30 or equal to or greater than 30%. And there's an example of a high intensity fire that you'll burn to control the encroachment of undesirable plants. The seasonal burn, the key thing is to burn when the grass is dormant, in winter or early spring, burning to remove moribund grass material, burn on a cool day when it isn't dangerous, and you will then automatically get a cool fire. Conversely, if you're burning to control the encroachment of undesirable plants, you need a high intensity fire, so you burn on a dry day before the rain to be able to achieve a maximum high intensity fire. The frequency of burning, Burning to remove moribund grass material. The grass sward becomes moribund when it is more than 4,000 kilograms per hectare. Therefore, the grass litter should not exceed 4,000 kilograms per hectare, and you can measure it with a decimeter. And this, of course, depends upon the accumulation rate of excess grass as influenced by rainfall and the stocking rate of animals in the area that is being grazed. And this, of course, will then vary according to the condition of the rangeland. Burning to control undesirable plants. This cannot be prescribed because it's going to depend upon the particular species which is the encroachment problem. Post-burn management. It's essential to maintain forage quality and also the condition of the grass sward, so that must be taken into consideration. So burning to remove or in domestic livestock systems, graze the regrowth as soon as possible to provide high quality forage for your livestock, and they will then but allow rest periods after the grazing to allow the grass to recover. In wildlife systems, to avoid continuous grazing after burning because they are attracted to these burnt areas, burn consecutive areas, adjacent areas at 6 to 8 week intervals to encourage some form of rotational resting or grazing of the area that has been burnt. The proof of any system is in the eating, and an example of a prescribed burning program for controlling bush encroachment is included here. And here is an area on a farm down in the Eastern Cape where there has been an encroachment of trees and shrubs to the detriment of the grass sward. There is a close-up view of it. We put a high-intensity fire through it, and then we stocked it with goats afterwards, and the high-intensity fire caused a significant top kill of the trees, and they all sprouted from the base, and the goats very successfully controlled the regrowth. And so this is a good example of the integration of fire and browsing with animals in controlling bush encroachment. And this has become a very successful way of dealing with the problem of bush encroachment, where there's this integration of fire and browsing with goats. And I'd just like to thank the farmer that we cooperated with in this particular trial. The other thing that there have been some recent developments in prescribed burning, which I'm not going to deal with now because Lynn is going to give us a quick overview of open-ended fire breaks, so I'll just work through this one. But something that I would like to just share with you, which is a recent development in the research and development section, is the multiple ignition trial that we've conducted here. And the objective of this particular trial was to determine whether high-intensity fires can be developed under mild weather conditions to reduce the fire risk. And we tested different ignition procedures to be able to see whether the different systems can result in different intensities of fires, trying to reduce the risk of burning under extremely high temperatures and low humidities. So we tested spiral and so-called race course ignition patterns versus perimeter ignitions, which I'll illustrate to you in this particular trial. And this is the spiral ignition, which we initiated with the helicopter. This is a case of little boys having great fun, where we put this dropped these ignition capsules at 15 to 20 meters apart in a spiral, and it came together and resulted in a dramatic increase in the intensity of the fire under fairly mild conditions. This is a race course ignition where we just crisscross over an area, and this also resulted in an increase in the intensity. As opposed to a perimeter ignition, where this is the area that we burnt. We started the fire down there, we took one line of fire up there and another one along there, and we circled it according to a perimeter, and then compared the intensity of the fires with the other different ignition patterns. And the results were that the perimeter ignition resulted in a fire intensity of about 3,500 kilojoules per second per meter, or megawatts per meter, whereas the spiral ignition and the racecourse ignition were 3 times more intense, indicating that you could possibly achieve less dangerous high-intensity fires under mild weather conditions by just burning them with different ignition patterns. So the conclusion is multiple ignitions 3 times more intense than perimeter ignitions. The other thing I'd like to we now tried this out on a field scale and with spiral and racecourse ignitions, and this is an example of a spiral ignition resulting in a very high intensity fire successfully controlling the bush encroachment in that particular area. The last one that I would like to just share with you that Professor Vegas asked me to bring to your attention was this instrument that we have for estimating grass fuel loads. It's called a disc pasture meter, and it's a very rapid technique for estimating grass fuel loads. The major portion of the vegetation which is used for burning in the savanna areas is grass, and this can be rapidly and reliably estimated with a so-called instrument called a disc pasture meter. There is the instrument, and it involves dropping an aluminium disc 18 inches or 45.7 centimeters in diameter onto the grass, and the distance that it's held off the ground has been correlated with how much grass there is, and we've developed a very simple way of estimating grass fuel loads. There is the example of the disc meter, 45.7 centimeters in diameter, and you drop it onto the grass from a standard height of 60 centimeters, record the height, and we've developed this particular relationship between settling height and disc height. So if you know what the disc height is, you can then work out how many kilograms there are per hectare. The calibration has been tested all over southern and East Africa, and we've also tested it in the United States in the tall grass prairies, in the United States in Kansas, and we found that all these different calibrations were not statistically different from one another. This is just a brief view of how one calibrates the disc. You put down a square quadrant, and you then get an idea of what you're drawing there, and a settling height for the disc, and storing the large time, weighing it, and developing this relationship between settling height. And we did it in the Kruger National Park, and there is the relationship, and it results in a very predictable and useful calibration. And we now developed a relationship between disc height and kilograms per hectare, which makes it easier for the people using estimating grass fuel loads in the field. The last thing I would like to just share with you, Domingos, is the water firebox which is an innovation of how to make fire breaks, developed by a farmer in our part of the world. And this is an open box-like structure fitted with 4 wooden handles. And the grass is set alight inside the box, and it is a very labor efficient technique. And there is the box, and you then burn inside it, and you just move it along, and it's a very safe way of making fire breaks. No research involved, but a very effective way of developing simple and safe fire breaks. So I'll pass on that gem of experience from a landowner to you for the possible use up at your fire laboratory. Thank you very much.